The sound of rain hammered against the cabin's wooden roof as lightning flashed across the dark sky. Blood mixed with rainwater as Marshal Thomas Blackwood dragged himself the final few feet toward the small cabin's door. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one sending fresh pain through the bullet wound in his side. With the last of his strength, he pounded his fist against the weathered door before collapsing onto the muddy porch. As darkness began to claim him, the door creaked open. A woman's silhouette appeared, lantern held high, illuminating her face. In that moment, recognition dawned in both their eyes. Sarah Wilkes stared down at the man who had once condemned her, driven her from town, and destroyed everything she'd built. Now, Marshal Blackwood lay dying at her doorstep, his life literally in her hands. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Your comment helps our community grow stronger. Thanks, and let's get back to the story. Sarah's first instinct was to close the door, to turn away as he had done to her 3 years ago. The rain intensified, washing more blood from the Marshals wound onto her porch. Thunder crashed overhead as Sarah wrestled with her conscience. With a sigh that carried the weight of her past, she set down her lantern and hooked her arms under his shoulders. "I should leave you for the wolves," she muttered, struggling with his weight as she dragged him inside. "Lord knows you'd have done the same to me." The cabin was warm, filled with the scent of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Various plants, roots, and tinctures lined the rough-hewn shelves, the tools of her healing trade, the very practice that had led to her being branded a witch by the man now bleeding on her floor. Sarah worked quickly, cutting away his rain-soaked shirt to reveal the angry wound in his side. The bullet had gone clean through, which was something of a blessing, but he'd lost too much blood. His skin was ashen, his breathing shallow. "Marshal Blackwood," she said, slapping his face lightly. "Thomas, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain and confusion. When they focused on her face, she saw the flash of recognition, followed immediately by fear. "You," he whispered, trying to push himself away. "Lie still," Sarah commanded, pressing him back down. "Unless you're in a hurry to meet your maker. Why would you help me?" His voice was barely audible above the storm. Sarah pressed a cloth against his wound, causing him to wince. "That's a question I'm asking myself right now." She reached for a bottle of whiskey and poured some over the wound. Thomas arched his back, a strangled cry escaping his lips. "I took an oath to heal. Even men like you." As she worked to stem the bleeding, memories of their last encounter flooded back. The crowd gathered outside her previous cabin in town. Thomas at the front, badge gleaming in the sunlight, face contorted with grief and rage. His wife, Catherine, had died the night before despite Sarah's efforts to save her. Thomas had been convinced Sarah's medicines had killed her, that her unconventional treatments were the work of the devil. "Witch," he had shouted, as the townsfolk murmured their agreement. "You've brought nothing but death to this town." They had given her 1 hour to pack her belongings before burning her cabin to the ground. She had fled into the wilderness, rebuilding her life far from town, from people, from the pain of rejection. Now, as she cleaned Thomas's wound, she wondered if this was fate's twisted idea of justice. "Who shot you?" she asked, preparing a poultice of yarrow and comfrey. Thomas's eyes were clearer now, though pain still etched lines around them. "Reeves' gang," he managed, "ambushed me, tracking them after the bank robbery." Sarah nodded, applying the poultice to both sides of the wound. "They took 3 bullets to bring you down? I'm almost impressed." "2," he corrected, wincing as she worked. "One's still in my leg." Sarah glanced down, noticing for the first time the blood-soaked fabric of his left pant leg. She cut away the material to reveal another wound, this one still containing the bullet. "This is going to hurt," she warned, reaching for a pair of long tweezers. "More than knowing my life depends on you?" Thomas asked, a hint of his old arrogance surfacing through the pain. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Much more." She dug the tweezers into the wound, probing for the bullet. Thomas's body went rigid, a scream tearing from his throat before he mercifully passed out. Sarah worked quickly, extracting the misshapen piece of lead and dropping it into a bowl with a metallic clink. "There," she murmured to his unconscious form. "That wasn't so bad. Was it, Marshal?" Through the night, Thomas drifted in and out of consciousness, fever taking hold as his body fought infection. Sarah stayed by his side, replacing cooling cloths on his forehead, forcing herbal teas between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow. In his delirium, he called for Catherine, apologized to people Sarah didn't know, and once, to her surprise, begged for her forgiveness. As dawn broke, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed-clean world. Sarah, exhausted from her night's vigil, dozed in a chair beside the bed where she had managed to move Thomas. The creak of floorboards startled her awake. Thomas was trying to sit up, his face pale and drawn but his eyes clear. "You should lie down," she said, rising to push him back. "How long have I been here?" he asked, resisting her efforts. "Just the night. You're not going anywhere today, maybe not tomorrow either." Thomas shook his head. "I have to. The Reeves gang, they'll have realized I'm not dead. They might come looking." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Here? Why would they come here? They saw which direction I headed. It's only a matter of time before they search every cabin in these parts." He met her eyes. "I've put you in danger. Again." The acknowledgement of his past actions hung between them. "You need to leave," Sarah said, moving to gather supplies. "If they find you here—" "I can barely stand," Thomas interrupted. "And you know these woods. Is there somewhere you could hide until they pass?" Sarah paused, considering. "There's a root cellar outside, but—" She was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Thomas tensed, reaching instinctively for a gun that wasn't there. "My rifle," he said urgently. "I put it by the door," Sarah replied, moving to peek out the window. Her heart sank as she made out 4 riders approaching through the trees. "It's too late to run." Thomas's face hardened with resolve. "Help me up. You'll tear your wounds open," Sarah protested. "Better that than watch you hang for harboring me." He swung his legs over the side of the bed, fighting a wave of dizziness. "The cellar. If you can help me there." Sarah made a quick decision. "No. They'll search it. Get back in bed." When he started to argue, she cut him off. "Trust me. For once in your life, Thomas Blackwood, trust someone else knows better than you." To her surprise, he relented, allowing her to help him back under the blankets. She quickly rearranged his bandages to appear as though he suffered from a different ailment, then sprinkled various herbs over the bed and floor around it. Last, she grabbed a small bottle from her shelf and dabbed its contents on his forehead and chest. "What is that?" Thomas asked, the pungent smell making his eyes water. "Something to make you look sick with consumption," she replied, musing her own hair and pinching her cheeks to bring color to them. "Not a word unless I tell you, and for God's sake, try to cough convincingly." The riders arrived with a thunder of hooves and the jangle of spurs. A heavy fist pounded on the door. "Coming," Sarah called, adopting a harried expression before opening the door. 4 men stood on her porch, led by a tall figure with a jagged scar running down his cheek. His hand rested casually on his holstered pistol. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat in mock politeness. "Jed Reeves, at your service." "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" Sarah asked, making her voice tremble slightly. "We're looking for a man. Marshal from Pine Creek. Might have passed this way yesterday." Sarah wrung her hands. "I haven't seen any Marshal, but I've been rather preoccupied." She glanced over her shoulder toward the bed where Thomas lay. "My husband's taken ill with the consumption. Been nursing him day and night." One of the men shifted nervously at the mention of the disease. Reeves, however, remained unmoved. "Mind if we take a look around?" Without waiting for permission, he pushed past her into the cabin, his men following. Sarah hurried after them. "Please, he needs rest," the doctor said any excitement could. "This won't take long." Reeves cut her off, his cold eyes surveying the cabin. Thomas chose that moment to launch into a fit of convincing coughing, doubling over in the bed. Sarah rushed to his side, patting his back as she shot worried glances at the outlaws. "Hank's been sick for weeks," she explained. "It's in his lungs now." Reeves approached the bed cautiously, studying Thomas's face. Thomas kept his eyes downcast, shoulders hunched, looking nothing like the proud lawman who had pursued the gang. The smell of the herbs and whatever Sarah had dabbed on him created a convincing picture of illness. "Sorry to hear about your trouble, ma'am," one of the younger gang members said, keeping his distance. Reeves wasn't so easily convinced. He reached for the blanket covering Thomas's side where the bullet had entered. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, but she maintained her concerned wife facade. "Please," she said, voice breaking. "The doctor said to keep him warm. Just checking something," Reeves replied with a cold smile. As his hand gripped the blanket, Thomas launched into another coughing fit, this one even more violent. He turned toward Reeves, coughing directly at the outlaw, who recoiled instinctively. "Christ, Jed, let's go," one of his men urged. "Ain't no Marshal hiding here, just some poor bastard about to meet his maker." Reeves hesitated, his eyes narrowing as he looked between Sarah and Thomas. For a moment, she was certain he saw through their ruse. Then he stepped back, wiping his hand on his pants as though he might have caught something. "If you see any sign of a lawman," he told Sarah, "you'd be wise to tell him the Reeves gang has moved on, heading to Red Rock territory." He tipped his hat again. "Mum." The outlaws filed out, and Sarah waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded before sagging against the door in relief. "Red Rock?" Thomas questioned, pushing himself up with effort. "That's the opposite direction from where they're really headed." "You know where they're going?" Sarah asked, returning to check his wounds, which thankfully hadn't reopened during his performance. "Pine Creek," Thomas replied grimly. "They were already hitting the bank when I tracked them down. Got away with half the town's savings. Now they're doubling back to finish what they started." Sarah frowned. "What else is in Pine Creek worth stealing?" "Payroll for the new railroad construction, due to arrive tomorrow." He met her eyes. "I need to get back. Warn them." "You need to heal," Sarah countered. "You'd never make it to town in your condition." Thomas's jaw set stubbornly. "People will die if I don't. And you'll die if you try," she shot back. "Look at you. You can barely sit up. Why do you care?" he challenged. "After what I did to you, I'd think you'd be happy to watch me bleed out on your porch." Sarah turned away, busying herself with her herbs. "I told you. I took an oath. Is that all it is?" His quiet question made her pause. She remembered Catherine, Thomas's wife, the weeks spent trying every remedy she knew as the woman wasted away from an illness Sarah now recognized as cancer, something no medicine of their time could cure. She remembered Catherine's gentle smile, her unfailing kindness even as pain ravaged her body. And she remembered Thomas's devotion, the way he'd held his wife's hand until the very end, the anguish in his eyes when Sarah had finally told him there was nothing more to be done. "Your wife was a good woman," Sarah said at last. "She wouldn't have wanted this. You dying in pursuit of vengeance, or me turning away someone who needs help, no matter our history." Thomas was silent for a long moment. "I was wrong," he finally said. "About you. About what happened to Catherine." Sarah turned to face him, surprised by the admission. "I needed someone to blame," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "It was easier than accepting that nothing could have saved her." "Some things are beyond our power to heal," Sarah said softly. "I drove you from your home, destroyed your reputation, and still you saved my life." Thomas shook his head in disbelief. "Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do," Sarah replied simply. "And because I'm not what you accused me of being." A fragile understanding formed between them, built on shared pain and unexpected mercy. It was interrupted by Thomas attempting to stand again, his face contorting with the effort. "You can't stop me," he grunted, swaying on his feet. Sarah rushed to steady him as his legs threatened to give way. "At least let me help you, you stubborn fool." "How?" "There's no time for me to heal properly." Sarah guided him back to the bed. "There might be a way. Something I've been working on, a tincture that accelerates healing. I've used it on animals with some success, but never on a person." "Is it dangerous?" Thomas asked. "Everything powerful enough to help is also powerful enough to harm," she answered truthfully. "But it's your only chance of being strong enough to ride by tomorrow." Thomas nodded. "Do it." Sarah retrieved a small dark bottle from a locked chest. The liquid inside was a deep amber color, almost luminescent in the morning light. "This will burn," she warned, measuring a careful dose into a cup. "And you'll feel worse before you feel better." Thomas took the cup without hesitation. "To new beginnings," he said wryly, before downing the contents in one swallow. The effect was immediate. Thomas gasped, his body going rigid as the medicine blazed through his system. For hours, he writhed in agony as the tincture worked, his wounds visibly healing at an accelerated rate. Sarah stayed by his side, wiping away the sweat that poured from him, murmuring reassurances when the pain became too intense. By nightfall, Thomas's fever had broken, and he slept peacefully. Sarah checked his wounds and found them significantly improved. still tender and far from fully healed, but no longer life-threatening. Her tincture had worked better than she could have hoped. When Thomas woke the next morning, he was able to stand without assistance, though he moved gingerly. "It's remarkable," he said, examining the partially healed wounds. "I've never seen anything like it." "No one has," Sarah replied, "which is why people fear what they don't understand." Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm riding to Pine Creek today," he stated, though it wasn't a question. "The Reeves gang will hit the payroll wagon by noon." "I know." Sarah handed him his cleaned and mended clothes. "That's why I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not," Thomas protested. "It's too dangerous." "You're still injured," Sarah pointed out. "You'll need someone to watch your back. And I know these woods better than anyone. We can cut through Devil's Pass and reach town hours before the gang expects anyone could have warned them." Thomas wanted to argue further but recognized the determination in her eyes and the truth in her words. "The townspeople won't welcome you," he reminded her. "Not after." He trailed off. "After you turned them against me," Sarah finished for him. "Perhaps. But I'm not doing this for their approval." As they prepared to leave, Thomas asked the question that had been nagging at him. "You could have let me die, or told Reeves who I was. Why risk everything to help me?" Sarah secured her medical bag to her saddle before answering. "Because healing isn't just about mending the body. Sometimes it's about mending what's broken between people." They rode hard through the morning, taking the treacherous shortcut through Devil's Pass that few knew existed. Thomas could feel his partially healed wounds protesting the rough journey, but Sarah's tincture had given him strength he shouldn't have had. By mid-morning, they crested the hill overlooking Pine Creek. The town looked peaceful, unaware of the danger approaching. Thomas felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with shame as they approached. This had been Sarah's home too once, before he'd driven her away. "Wait," Sarah said, pulling her horse to a stop before they reached the town proper. "I should stay hidden until you've explained." Thomas shook his head. "We faced this together. It's time I set things right." Their arrival caused an immediate stir. The Marshal, presumed dead, returning with the woman many still considered a witch. Thomas ignored the stares and whispers, heading straight for the sheriff's office where his deputy, Jim Parker, nearly fell out of his chair at the sight of him. "Marshal, we thought the Reeves gang had gotten you for sure." "They nearly did," Thomas replied, making introductions. "Miss Wilkes saved my life." Jim's eyes widened with recognition. "The healer woman? But you said—" "I was wrong." Thomas cut him off firmly. "And we don't have time for that now. The Reeves gang is planning to hit the payroll wagon today." As Thomas explained the situation, a crowd gathered outside, curious about the commotion. Among them was Mayor Harrison, who pushed his way into the office, stopping short at the sight of Sarah. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. "After what happened with your wife?" "She saved my life," Thomas interrupted. "And she's here to help save this town." He turned to address the gathering crowd. "I made a terrible mistake 3 years ago. I blamed Miss Wilkes for my wife's death because I couldn't accept that some illnesses can't be cured. In my grief, I condemned an innocent woman and drove her from her home. Today, I'm setting the record straight." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some faces showed skepticism, others confusion or outright hostility. Sarah stood tall under their scrutiny, her quiet dignity more powerful than any defensive words could have been. "We can settle all that later," Thomas continued. "Right now, we have a gang of killers heading this way, expecting to find us unprepared." The threat of immediate danger shifted the town's focus. Under Thomas's direction, they quickly organized a defense, positioning armed men around the bank and the road where the payroll wagon would arrive. Sarah's knowledge of the surrounding terrain proved invaluable, helping them identify the most likely approach the gang would take. As noon approached, tension mounted. Thomas, positioned on the roof of the hotel with a clear view of the main road, felt his wounds beginning to throb. The effects of Sarah's tincture were wearing off, the pain returning with increasing intensity. He gritted his teeth, determined to see this through. Sarah, who had insisted on staying close in case of injuries, noticed his pallor. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she whispered, reaching for her bag. "I'm fine," he insisted, though the sweat beading on his forehead told a different story. Before she could argue, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. The payroll wagon was approaching right on schedule with 2 armed guards riding alongside. And from the opposite direction, just as Thomas had predicted, came the Reeves gang, 5 riders moving with purposeful speed. "Here they come," Thomas murmured, raising his rifle. The events that followed unfolded with chaotic speed. The Reeves gang, realizing too late that they had ridden into a trap, scattered for cover. Gunfire erupted from all sides as the townspeople defended their money and their lives. Thomas's first shot caught one of the gang members in the shoulder, sending him tumbling from his horse. In the midst of the firefight, Thomas spotted Jed Reeves breaking away, heading toward the back of the bank. "He's going for the rear entrance," Thomas called to Jim, who was positioned below. Despite the searing pain in his side, Thomas moved across the rooftops to get a better angle. As he adjusted his position, his wound tore open, sending a wave of agony through his body. His foot slipped, and he fell hard onto the roof, his rifle clattering away. Sarah, who had been watching from the adjacent building, made her way to him with remarkable agility. "You're bleeding again," she said, pressing a cloth to his side. "Reeves," Thomas gasped, trying to push himself up. "He's getting away." As if summoned by his name, Jed Reeves appeared on the street below, dragging a terrified bank teller as a shield, his gun pressed to the man's head. "Drop your weapons," Reeves shouted to the townspeople, "or I put a bullet in his brain." A tense standoff ensued. Thomas, unable to get a clear shot from his position even if he could reach his rifle, watched helplessly as Reeves backed toward where the gang had left their horses. "Is there another way down?" he asked Sarah urgently. She nodded, pointing to a service ladder on the far side of the roof. "But you're in no condition." Thomas was already moving, ignoring the fresh blood soaking through his shirt. Sarah followed, supporting him as they descended. On the ground, Thomas drew his sidearm, moving carefully around the building to approach Reeves from behind. "Get ready to run," he told the bank teller as he pressed his gun against Reeves's back. "It's over, Jed." Reeves froze, then slowly turned his head. The recognition in his eyes quickly gave way to fury. "The Marshal," he spat. "Should have known it was you at that cabin. That wife of yours was a bit too convincing." "Let him go," Thomas ordered, pressing the gun harder into Reeves's spine. With a sudden movement, Reeves shoved the teller forward and spun around, his own gun coming up. 2 shots rang out almost simultaneously. Thomas felt the burn as Reeves's bullet grazed his arm, but his own shot hit true, striking Reeves in the chest. The outlaw staggered back, disbelief crossing his face before he crumpled to the ground. With their leader fallen, the remaining gang members quickly surrendered. The aftermath was chaotic but controlled. The wounded were gathered in the town hall, where Sarah, setting aside years of rejection, worked tirelessly to treat them. Some townsfolk still regarded her with suspicion, but as they witnessed her skill and compassion, treating friend and foe alike, old prejudices began to crack. Thomas, his own wounds rebandaged by Sarah, watched her work with admiration. "You're still the best healer I've ever known," he said when she finally took a moment's rest beside him. "Not good enough to save Catherine," she replied softly. "No one could have saved her," Thomas acknowledged, the truth he'd fought for so long finally accepted. "I see that now." Mayor Harrison approached them, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Marshal Blackwood has explained everything to us," he said to Sarah. "On behalf of the town council, I'd like to offer you a formal apology for the misunderstanding." Sarah regarded him steadily. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mayor. It was a witch hunt." Harrison had the grace to look ashamed. "Yes, well, we'd like to make amends. Your old property is still vacant. The town would be honored if you'd consider returning to your practice here." Sarah glanced at Thomas, who watched her with an expression of hope and something deeper, something still fragile but growing. "I'll consider it," she said at last, "though I expect some things would need to change." As the day faded into evening, Thomas found Sarah outside the town hall, gazing at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Will you stay?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. Sarah considered the question. "This place holds painful memories. It also holds possibilities," Thomas replied. "For new beginnings, for healing old wounds." He hesitated, then added, "For us, perhaps." Sarah turned to face him, her expression softening. "Healing takes time, Thomas, for bodies and for hearts." "Then it's fortunate," he said with a small smile, "that we have a skilled healer among us." As they stood together under the vast expanse of stars, the distance between them, once filled with grief, misunderstanding, and accusation, slowly began to close. The healing had begun, not just of physical wounds, but of a community torn by fear and prejudice, and of two hearts that had found unexpected redemption in each other. Before we end today's story, drop a comment if you'd like to see more tales from the Western frontier. Your engagement helps us bring more stories to life. Until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest healing happens when we open our hearts to those we once feared or misunderstood.